Howdy, folkses. It's time for another lame top 5 list from the Vile One. This is my list of the top 5 coolest fighters in sci-fi. Now, each fighter on this list is on here for different reasons, and it may not be because they're the most powerful or fastest or anything like that. It's just because of whatever reason I think justifies them for being cool. Also, the reasons for one may not be the same reasons for another. And these are just my opinions. If you disagree, that's okay. You're allowed to be wrong. Rock solid. Velocifighters from Power Rangers. This one makes the list not because it's necessarily a good-looking fighter. In fact, there's 2 different versions of this fighter that were used in the show. But the reasons it makes the list is because it was the first fighter used by the villains in a way that made the villains seem more like a threat, and made them kind of competent. Well, at least for Power Rangers. And it mixed up the giant monster fights giant robot dynamic, which is kind of cool. And even though it has kind of a generic sounding name, Velocifighter sounds kind of cool. F-302, Stargate. This one makes the list because of what it represents in the context of the show. The progression of Earth technology over the course of each season. First we had the X-301, then we had the X-302, and finally the production model, the F-302, showing humanity improving with each season. The F-302 shows that with a little ingenuity, Earth could make something on par with, or even better in some ways, than a technologically superior foe. And it shows that sometimes advanced tech is not always better than good old-fashioned kinetic weaponry. It also helps that these things were basically a jack-of-all-trades, or Swiss Army knife when it came to fighters. They had railguns, missiles, big thrusters to get into space, a small hyperdrive. They were capable of launching really big nukes. They had inertial dampeners, grapple cables. These things can basically do it all. And while they may not be the best fighter, they're certainly cool. The VF-1 Valkyrie from Macross and Robotech. First, they take an F-14 Tomcat, one of the coolest jet aircraft ever made, and the hero plane of Maverick from Top Gun, and then they turned it into a transforming mech suit, and then they used it to fight aliens. I mean, what is more awesome than that? I mean, an F-14 that can fly just as good in space as it can in atmosphere, and turns into a humanoid robot with a gun. Add to the fact that this is also the basis for Jetfire, one of the coolest Transformers. This thing is so cool it impacted more than just one franchise. Aurora class, Babylon 5. This one makes my list because it was the first realistic sci-fi fighter I ever saw. The placement and directionality of the thrusters, the fact that in lieu of phlebotinum or technobabble to explain away inertia, the pilots stand up to help mitigate that, in cockpits that can eject. They also used Newtonian physics in how they fly instead of acting like World War II fighters in space. This design was actually so cool that frickin' NASA asked J. Michael Straczynski if they could use it for a potential design to use in actual space. And you can't get much cooler than that. Naboo N1. This one will probably be the most controversial one on this list. Well, maybe after the Velocifighter. But I can't help but love the N1. I know there will be plenty of X-Wing fans raging in the comments, but this one always just made sense to me, more than any other fighter in Star Wars. I mean, it has a bubble cockpit for visibility, much like the real-world P-51D Mustang, which is really helpful as the fighters in Star Wars always seem to fight in visual range. And being able to see is kind of a huge advantage. Just ask a TIE pilot. And it has lasers right in front of the pilot instead of far off to the sides like some other Star Wars fighters, allowing for more precise aim even without pewter aid. It has torpedoes to hit harder targets or pack more of a punch when needed. It's got shield, speed, and probably the sleekest and sexiest fighter design in all of Star Wars. And of course, chrome does not hurt the coolness factor. Plus, this one adds a little bit for me because it was a secret unlockable in the original Star Wars Rogue Squadron game for the Nintendo 64. And the secret was actually kept so well that it remained hidden between the 6 months of the release of the game and when The Phantom Menace was actually released to theaters. Meaning that just after you saw the movie, you could go home and unlock a new fighter for a game that you've had for half a year. And that is just cool. Alright, that's my list. Complain in the comments how I didn't include your favorite, but after you do, post a top 5 list you want my opinion on. Try to keep it in the realms of sci-fi and fantasy though. Later all.